Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. Tonight, we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the sinking of the HMAS Patricia Cam. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Flight Lieutenant Ashley McAlpine. Flight Lieutenant McAlpine is the grandson of the Reverend Leonard Kentish, one of the casualties of HMAS Patricia Cam. The Patricia Cam was a wooden motor vessel built in Sydney, commissioned in 1942. The vessel was soon after requisitioned to become an auxiliary minesweeper during the Second World War. When she arrived in Darwin, the vessel became a transport for personnel and supplies. On the afternoon of the 22nd of January 1943, HMAS Patricia Cam was attacked and sunk while sailing towards the Wessel Islands by a Japanese float plane. 2 sailors and 2 men from the Yulangu Nation were killed during the attack. 2 more sailors drowned after drifting away from their comrades. A sailor and another Yulangu man were mortally wounded and died shortly after reaching land the following morning. Reverend Leonard Kentish was taken prisoner by the Japanese and executed. Today, we remember the sinking of HMAS Patricia Cam. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We warmly welcome the family of Senior Stoker Percival James Cameron, whose story will be told shortly. We also welcome the families of all other men who were on board HMAS Patricia Cam when she was attacked. We're honoured to acknowledge Mr Alex McGowan, President, ACT Naval Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. Could I ask you to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem? If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Stoker Class 2 Percival James Cameron. Known as Percy, Percival Cameron was born in Sydney on the 5th of August 1918 to John and Sylvia Cameron. At the outbreak of the Second World War, Cameron was a qualified pastry chef working in Sydney. Shortly after learning of Australia's involvement in the war, he married his sweetheart, Nancy Margaret Lee. Their daughter, Janice Lee Cameron, was born 2 years later. Cameron was remembered for bringing boxes of pastries home for his family after work, and also was thought to have snuck out at night time to take part in amateur boxing matches. He was called up for militia service on the 24th of April 1942, but was discharged 5 days later as his occupation was listed as protected. But Cameron must have felt the pull of duty, for a few months later he joined the Royal Australian Naval Reserve. He was first sent to HMAS Cerberus, where he became a member of Class 229 and underwent training to become a ship's stoker. After completing his training, he and several of his classmates were posted to the shore base, HMAS Melville in Darwin. On the 12th of January 1943, Cameron was posted to the crew of the HMAS Patricia Cam, an auxiliary transport ship. The following morning, the ship left Darwin, carrying supplies for outlying stations. When the ship stopped at Goulburn Island on the 19th of January, 2 passengers were taken aboard, one of whom was the Reverend Leonard Kentish, who was the senior Methodist chairman in the Northern Territory and the chief coast watcher. The second man was Paddy Bubbawan, a local ship's pilot who came aboard to aid the crew in navigating the islands. 2 days later, the ship reached Milingimbi Mission. Here, 5 Yolngu men were taken aboard as passengers. The Patricia Cam continued its journey early the next morning, heading for Elcho Island. The day was perfect for travel, with flat seas and a warm sun. By the early afternoon, most of the crew and passengers were relaxing on deck and the hatches, but this idyll was about to be cruelly shattered. At around 1 p.m, a Japanese float plane, with its engines cut, dove out of the sun and released one of its bombs when it was no more than 100 feet above the Patricia Cam. The bomb crashed through the upper deck, killing one of the Yolngu men before it struck the bottom of the wooden hull, blowing the bottom out of the vessel. The Patricia Cam began sinking immediately. One of the sailors, Ordinary Seaman Neil Penglaze, who was below decks, was likely killed in the explosion and went to the bottom with the ship. Both of the ship's lifeboats were destroyed, but the rescue raft remained intact and was used by some survivors. Others clung onto hatches and others onto flotsam. In a letter to Cameron's daughter Jan, one of the survivors, Lieutenant John Largo, described her father's bravery in the aftermath of the first bomb going off. He made a dash for the only gun in an effort to return fire, but the ship sunk under him before he could get away any shots. He continued, "I can assure you that your father was a man of whom you can be very proud." The Japanese aircraft made another attack run and released its second bomb, which landed amongst the men in the water. Able seaman Edward Nobes and brothers Jiminbui and Jinpula Unipingu were killed, and Cameron was severely wounded. The aircraft continued circling for another 30 minutes, with a Japanese rear gunner unsuccessfully attempting to machine gun the survivors in the water. The plane then appeared to fly off, but returned soon after and landed. The rear gunner again attempted to murder the survivors bobbing in the water, but those in the water were again spared. One of the airmen climbed down onto one of the aircraft's floats, brandishing a pistol, and gestured to the men in the water to come closer. When the invitation was not taken up by anyone in the water, the aircraft taxied over to another group. The Reverend Kentish was hauled from the water and the aircraft took off. 20 men were left to their fate in the water. 2 were unable to make it to the main group, and they disappeared after nightfall and were not seen again. Cameron was laid on the raft along with another wounded sailor and a wounded Yolngu man, Miramar Marika. The remaining survivors hung onto the sides of the raft and paddled towards the island. After over 12 hours in the water, they came ashore on Gullaroo Island, and the Yolngu men started a fire to provide warmth and a signal for the mainland. Cameron died of his wounds just hours after reaching land. He was buried by his comrades above the waterline on the beach. He was 24 years old. The wounded Yolngu man, Marika, died later that afternoon and was buried beside him. The remaining survivors rescued on the 29th of January. 4 sailors and 3 Yolngu men died as a result of the sinking of the Patricia Cam. Reverend Kentish was taken to the Japanese base at Dobo Island, where he endured beatings and torture before being beheaded on the 4th of February 1943. His fate was not discovered until 1946, eventually leading to the arrest, the trial and the execution of the man who had ordered his death. Today, Percival Cameron's name appears on the Plymouth Naval Memorial in Devon, which commemorates British and Commonwealth sailors who died at sea and have no known grave. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour to my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. You will see him third from the left. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Stoker Class 2, Percival James Cameron, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave but the cruel sea, no flowers lie at their head, a rusting hulk their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old, age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.